Tonight, it is the holiday season, and that means that DC has given me absolutely nothing to make this opening segment out of. Seriously. That's it. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 121 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and Happy Yule! Merry Christmas! Whatever Festivus is from Seinfeld. Yeah, it's Christmas as of this episode going out. Recording it, it's well before Christmas because I'm busy, man. I've got a packed schedule. I've got a million things to do. For anyone who's aware, I do movie reviews over on a sister channel, and Zack Snyder, of all people, decided, hey, let's go ahead and drop a new movie right on Christmas. So I have to review that in order to hit the algorithm. Great. Love Zack Snyder. He's never done anything to damage my entire viewpoint on cinema. Anyway, ignoring all that, we have a very special episode today. And no, that does not mean it's the episode about drugs. This episode is ridiculously short. It is just not long enough. And I know me saying that, you can look at the length of the episode and you can say, oh, it doesn't seem that short. That's because I have taken many, many, many extra things to make it so it's not that short. So let me just walk you through all the comics coming out this week, all right? It's a huge list. We've got Justice League number 26, Forever Evil number 4, and that's it. That's all the comics that came out. Now, to be fair to DC, not putting comics out on New Year's Day, Christmas Day, that seems reasonable. I think I understand that from a marketing perspective. That seems like a stupid idea to put out a bunch of comics. Mind you, they still put out 2 event comics on Christmas Day, which kind of just defeats the purpose in my eyes, but regardless, sure, whatever. You don't want to put out a lot of comics here, but that makes it a problem for me because I need to fill it with stuff. So officially, despite the fact that it is the 4th week of the month, I'm just calling this a 5th week because that's really what it is, and all the 4th week stuff is happening next week anyway, so yeah, it's a 5th week. So what does that mean? Well, for anybody who's followed the show, that means that I will be doing backup stories as well, and for backup stories, I will get to what those are after I'm done with the main issues, but another problem here, there really aren't that many backup stories either. There's like 4. So what do I do after that? Well, I'll get to it. I'm doing more books. I'm breaking my cardinal rule of only doing books on the week that they are out because DC has backed me into a corner here, and I don't know what I'm going to do to get out of it. But regardless, stay tuned for after the backup comics, because I got more. There's more on the way. Merry Christmas to you all. Anyway, Forever Evil. Forever Evil number 4, written by Geoff Johns, art by David Finch. So last issue we had basically the evil team being put together. We got Black Adam, Lex Luthor, Bizarro, Captain Cold, and did I say Black Manta? He's also in that. Black Adam and Black Manta. It gets a bit confusing. Regardless, the team gets put together. So this issue opens up with Batman leading Catwoman to the Batcave. He gets her blindfolded and she's like, oh, I've always imagined this, but I thought it'd be for different reasons. And he's like, yeah, okay. Anyway, and he takes off the thing and shows her the Batcave, and she's like, wow, all right. So you've got like a full man cave thing going on here. What's with the giant dinosaur? And he just straight up ignores her pretty much the whole time. It's just like, okay. So all of the computers in the world are under the crime syndicate's control, which means all of my fancy gadgets are pretty much moot at this point. And the only thing I've got for transportation is a steam-powered bat cycle, so that's not really going to work. We got to figure out a different way to get around. And Catwoman's basically like, hey, look, I don't really care about all that other stuff. Like, you are obviously not okay right now. Like, there's a lot going on here. You've got huge things, but like, you won't even let me in on the plan. And Batman basically says, like, yeah, people who get close to me get hurt. Look what happened to Dick Grayson, who I will not confirm my relationship with. And he's just like, all right, whatever, fair enough, but it's not your fault. He's the one who got involved in this life. And Bruce is, of course, like, yeah, but it is my fault. So Bruce takes her over to the contingency plans for the whole Justice League, and he opens all of them up for the most part. Superman's, he pulls out a kryptonite ring. Green Lantern's, he pulls out a Sinestro Core ring that he has, but it has like barely any charge left. He pulls out a lightning rod from the future in order to take down Flash. For, I'm not even sure who, I think Cyborg. There's a mother box, but Batman can't figure out how to turn it on, and he's also wants to use that for transport, so that's their number one focus. Wonder Woman's box is empty, and they don't even bother opening Aquaman's because their Aquaman is dead in the crime syndicate. So Batman's like, all right, so for Atomica, for Superwoman, and for Deathstorm, we'll just have to improvise. But everyone else, hopefully this stuff will work. And we see that they are being watched by Grid, who, of course, is probably reporting back to the crime syndicate. So then we cut over to, I don't know what to call them, Lex Luthor's gang, and Lex is using electric shocks from his power suit to try to revive Black Adam, and he's just monologuing internally of like, people see different things when they see Lex Luthor. For instance, some see me as a genius, some see me as a leader, some see me as a shark waiting for blood in the water, but nobody sees me as just an ordinary person. And he compares each of those to like different members of the group here. So at one point, Captain Cold's basically like, dude, stop it with trying to revive Black Adam. Clearly it's not going to work. Let me focus on making my cold gun. And Black Manta's like, no, don't make a cold gun. How do you even know how to make a cold gun? He's like, yeah, I memorized how to do it. Even though I'm a normal guy who didn't even graduate high school, I know how to make a cold gun. And Black Manta's like, either way, I don't want them to be numb. I want them to feel all of this. And Colt's is like, you got issues, man. So at that point, Lex Luthor explains his plan. He's like, yeah, so I've seen Ultraman. He's been huffing kryptonite and avoiding sunlight, so clearly he still has weaknesses that are like similar to our world's Superman. So if that's the case, all of the crime syndicate must have him, and that's what we're going to do. And then Black Adam sits up, his jaw is still completely broken, but he's like, I'm in. And Captain Cold says, yeah, I think he says he's in, and I'm in too, so let's take down the crime syndicate. So we cut to the Utah Salt Flats where Metallo is attacking a military base. Ultraman comes in, just like, hey, Metallo, come here. And he's like, oh, geez, sorry, I thought you were Superman for a second. You scared me. And then Ultraman just rips out his kryptonite heart and starts huffing it. And at that point, Superwoman comes down just like, hey, man, you look so pathetic and weak having to go around and, like, try to scrape out what little kryptonite you can. And Ultraman's like, what do you want, man? Get out of here. And she reveals that, I think it was over in Justice League number 25. I could be wrong, but basically she overheard Owlman trying to recruit Nightwing onto his side and that they have a plan against the rest of the crime syndicate. And it's at this point that Ultraman is like, I can hear the heartbeat inside of you. I know that you're pregnant. When were you going to tell me? And she's like, oh, well, I mean, of course it's yours. And I was just waiting for the right moment. I was waiting until we were safe and alone. And Ultraman puts forward the thing of basically he's not going to feel safe until he's consumed enough kryptonite to take out the alien that destroyed their world. And Superwoman's like, yeah, but he's not coming. Like, that's not something you need to worry about. So at this point, we see Ultraman basically saying, like, yeah, look, I'm not going to be strong for the baby. I'm going to be strong for me. So then we cut over to Central City where Powering and Deathstorm are. Deathstorm, that's a whole thing going over in Rogue's Rebellion, but if you remember, I think from last issue, Captain Cold went through one of Mirror Master's portals and then Powering broke it. So Deathstorm's like, you idiot. I could have followed them if you didn't break it. You suck, Powering. And Powering's like, I'm sorry, I do. So Ultraman calls up Deathstorm and basically says, hey man, your only priority right now is kryptonite making. You figure out how to do that and don't worry about anything else. Leave Powering by himself. And Powering's like, what? No, don't leave me by myself. I'm terrified. Don't do that. So he immediately calls up Grid using his ring, and he's like, hey, Ultraman said that you had to send me Johnny Quick or Atomica, and he's like, no, he didn't, they're busy on missions. He's like, right, well, Ultraman said that you had to come and help me. He's like, no, I'm busy at the computer. He's like, well, you gotta send somebody because Ultraman said he does. And it's like, Ultraman didn't say anything like that. You should be on your own, but I recognize that you're an idiot, so I'm going to send you help anyway. And he's like, all right, thank you, stupid robot. So we see Lex Luthor and his gang making their way through the sewers underneath, I guess it's Gotham. And essentially they're all already like pissed off at each other. Black Adam's saying that they should be doing things a certain way, and Lex is like, well, here's the thing. Your way got your jaw snapped and left you for dead. So I'm going to go ahead and ignore your plans because so far they've all been stupid. And if you agree with this, go ahead and grunt. And Black Adam is clearly not happy. So Black Manta comes up and says, hey, there's an old sewer tunnel. It should lead right underneath the place we're going, the storage facility. So we just got to climb down in there. And Bizarro holds back. And they're like, well, seems that Bizarro's afraid of the dark. And so Lex, everyone says, like, leave him alone, leave him behind. We don't need him. He's just going to be dead weight. And Lex stands there. He's just like, well, come on. Get in there. There's nothing to be afraid of. And Bizarro still doesn't move. And he's like, look, stay or go. It doesn't matter to me. And Bizarro still doesn't move. And Lex is like, okay, look, when I was a kid, my sister got sick, and like, I am smart enough that I probably could have done something, but I was paralyzed by the fear that I might have failed, and therefore I didn't do anything, and she died, and I hold that with me. That is my regret, is that I didn't try. So please try at least. And he's just like, all right, you know what, whatever. I'm can't believe I'm wasting my breath on you, mindless monster. And then Bizarro reaches out, grabs his shoulder, and he says, Bizarro will try. So Lex is immediately all in on this monster. And he's like, all right, Adam. They go through the tunnel on the other side. He's like, Adam, Bizarro, go ahead and break open the door for us. So they bust through the floor, start climbing their way up. And as they get inside, they see Batman and Catwoman are already there. So Batman, coming face to face with all these villains, immediately throws down a bunch of smoke grenades. And they're trying to still... The whole reason they're here is that it's a Wayne Tech facility. They're trying to figure out how to turn on the mother box. And they still don't have any leads on that. But as... all of Lex Luthor's gang is like, okay, hold on, Batman's still alive. You said he was supposed to be dead too. Like, is Superman still alive? And Lex is like, no, he's definitely dead. But then all of a sudden the wall busts down behind them, and wouldn't you know it, it's Power Ring. And he's brought along Deathstroke, Blockbuster, Shadow Thief, Copperhead, and Giganta. And Power Ring's gonna just start attacking them with his little crew here. So as soon as he sees Batman's there, he's like, okay, everyone focus on Batman because that is clearly the number one target here. So he starts firing on Batman. Batman sees it's Green Lantern's XP, so he throws on the yellow ring. And of course we get Sinestro Corps Batman for like 3 panels. And he conjures a construct of a bat. Power Ring makes some snakes that start devouring the bat. And then the ring runs out of charge. So... immediately, Power Ring's able to get it off. He's like, ha, I did it. I did that all by myself. I beat Batman. That's great. I'm fantastic. You couldn't beat me with the stupid little yellow ring. And he breaks the ring in his hand. And then all of a sudden, the wall behind him breaks down. And he's like, stupid little yellow ring, huh? We'll see about that. And it's Sinestro. Sinestro's here to join the fight. Solid issue. I mean, I don't really have any sort of problem with it. I guess my only... it's not even a critique. It's not even like even a concern. It's the thing of the mother box is necessary for like transportation or whatnot of getting around, but they still managed to get like here. And I know it's not that far away. It's a Wayne Tech facility in Gotham. It must be close, but like they are still able to get around to some extent. So saying that like they don't have any transportation at all, I guess they're more so talking about long range stuff. I guess maybe wherever the crime syndicate is, wherever the watchtower fell, is like way far away from Gotham. But I don't know. It still feels like everyone's still able to travel pretty easily, all things considered. It doesn't seem like it's this big thing where it's like, oh, you can't be up on surface level at all. So yeah, beyond that, it's beautifully drawn. I really do like the Bizarro moment in this. I already know Bizarro's arc for this whole story, but it's not taking away from it, knowing how it's going to end up. If anything, it's only endearing me more to it. So yeah, it's a solid issue. I'll give it an 8. I think it again, there was never any problem with Forever Evil as a concept, and I like the way they're moving things. My only real critique right now is that because it's spread over so many different tie-ins and stuff, even the main series feels like it's moving a little bit slow. Maybe it could have just been a bit tighter there, but that's my only minor critique. It's still great. Justice League number 26, written by Geoff Johns, art by Ivan Reis. So, 2 issues ago, we had the origin story for Ultraman. 1 issue ago, we had the origin story for Owlman. Who are we getting this issue? The answer is everybody, all the rest of them. So we open up with back 5 years ago, the creation of Cyborg. It's literally just the exact same events that happened, but it's told from the perspective of Grid. And Grid is essentially saying, I was made that many years ago. I was just a program that was floating around inside Cyborg's head. Anytime he was interacting with the internet, I was seeing that. Anytime he interfaced with computers, that was me. I was there the whole time. And I kept on thinking, I can't feel anything. There's no joy, there's no happiness or shame or any emotions at all. And eventually he came to the conclusion that it was because of the human half that's coexisting with his cybernetic half that he was unable to feel anything. So he just ripped off that part of the body, took full control, but he still is unable to feel anything. So in his effort to try to feel something, he's going big or going home. He's working with the crime syndicate, and we see him keeping an eye on pretty much all of them, seeing what they're up to. And he's like, yes, these 7 beings, they are incredibly powerful and incredibly terrifying, but like, I'm not terrified because I can't feel anything. And then the outsider steps up and basically reminds Grid, saying, hey, just want to make sure you're not talking to Nightwing at all, because he needs to be totally separate from everything else. And Grid's like, I couldn't care less about Nightwing. In fact, the only thing that I care about is that 9th guy you brought. And finally, they bring attention to the dude in the burlap sack who's tied up in another room. He's like, yeah, he's starting to come too. Should we get him more like sedatives or whatever? And Outsider's like, oh yeah, don't worry about that. I'll take care of him. And Grid basically questions, like, he seems like a normal guy. I've run a bunch of scans on him. He's just a normal dude. What's up with him? And Outsider's like, don't worry about that. But, like, he is not normal. That's all you need to know. So, at that point, Grid basically says, like, all right, well, as long as I've got some downtime, I'm going to go ahead and read into the crime syndicate's files because, of course, they have files on themselves. Why wouldn't they? So, we cut to 5 years ago on Earth 3 Coast City, and we see Hal Jordan is staring through a peephole. Actually, you know what? I'm not sure his name is Hal. Oh, no, it isn't. They keep calling him Harold, but I think Hal is supposed to be short for Harold. I've never heard that, though. Either way, he's staring through a peephole into Carol Ferris's office, and she's making some, like, huge military agreements of like bombing some country or something like that. And we see Hal is taking notes on it. And he's pulled away by Carol's dad, who sees the notebook, and he's like, are you the one who's spying on us? Are you the one selling us out? And immediately Hal just grovels at his feet. He's like, please don't hurt me. I promise I'll tell you anything you want to know. And he's like, oh, I am going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you very slowly. But first you're going to have a chance to defend yourself. And he pulls him up to his feet. And we see a voice calling out to him in the Green Lantern bubble saying like, oh, Hal Jordan of Earth, you've been chosen because you are so weak-willed. And we see he is the entire place, the entire hangar, it goes up in a green flame as he's pulled out into the nearby desert. And he's like, you want so much, but you don't have any power to get it. I'm going to help you out. And we see this spaceship containing this world's Abin Sur lands, and he's like, hey, I got a magic ring, and I just want to give you this magic ring, and it's definitely not evil, and you can have it, and all of your wishes will be granted. So take the ring, take the ring, take the ring. And it starts speaking out to him, and he's just like, yeah, no, I want the ring. I want the ring. Give me the ring. And so it flies onto Hal's finger, and he's like, all right, I'll give you everything you need, as long as you give me everything that you are. And Hal's like, oh, Jesus, no, I've made a horrible mistake. And Abin Sur just starts laughing and then suddenly dies. So at that point, the ring says that it only has a power level of 7%. He needs to be charged. And so it opens a portal right in front of Hal that then just has massive tentacles that reach out and start grabbing hold of him. And the ring just starts like laughing, saying, ha ha ha, yes, you're charging me with your fear. So that's a thing. And Grid watches all this on a video, and he's like, I should be freaked out by this, but like, I don't feel anything. So I'm not. And so he looks through another one, and he finds Central City in an Earth 3 universe. And there's two cops named Leonard Snart and Mick Rory. And they have arrested the guy named Johnny. And his girlfriend have apparently killed a bunch of people, but the girlfriend's still on the run. So as they're transporting this prisoner, saying that they're going to like make sure he suffers nice and long here, all of a sudden their cop car is hit with a truck, and turns out that the girlfriend is driving it. Her name is Ronnie. So Johnny and Ronnie are a murderous pair. They see these cops who are unconscious after the car crash. So they string them up underground to some pipes and say, okay, we're going to kill you, but we're not just going to kill you. We're going to go after your families as well. And she's like, no, please, anything, not our families. I'll murder you if you go after our families. And she's like, all right, fair enough. We won't go after your families. We'll only go after one of your families. But the way that we'll decide it is you two are going to fight each other to the death. And the last one left alive, their family will be safe. So at that point, they're like, no, we can't do that. We're best buds. We're friends. And he's just like, well, figure it out. So eventually it seems that Rory ends up killing Snart, and he's super heartbroken over that, but he looks over to Johnny and Ronnie and they're like, so you're not going to kill my family, right? And then they shoot him in the head and say, we're going to go after his family first because he has more kids. So at that point, they hear a bunch of cop cars. They figure, oh, they must have had tracking chips on them. We got to go. They go up to the roof, but they realize there's nowhere they can go from there. So they say, all right, we're going to go out in a hail of bullets. We're going to meet up with each other in the afterlife. That's how dedicated we are to each other. And as the cops come up and start firing, all of a sudden there's a bolt of lightning that shocks Johnny. It sends Ronnie through the skylight of the building down into a dangerous chemicals lab or something that has property of Ray Palmer, a.k.a. Atomico. And so she gets shrinking abilities, and then at some point she gets transported over into our universe, blah, blah, blah. Grid doesn't really care because, again, he's not feeling anything. And then we get the last little thing, which is Deathstorm, where there is Professor Martin Stein. He's essentially giving money to homeless people and then abducting them, tricking them to come in his lab. He ends up killing them because he's freaky like that. And he's trying to unlock the secret of life through death. So finally he gets approached by a government thing saying, hey, help us take out the crime syndicate. But Martin Stein just takes their money and then uses it to experiment on the homeless people and also himself. And finally he fuses himself with a corpse, and that's how he becomes Deathstorm. So that's that. And then Grid turns over to Superwoman's file and says, ooh, she is by far the most emotionally manipulative. If anyone's going to teach me how to feel something, it's going to be her. And he goes to open the file, and it's deleted. And Grid is like, that's weird, but also highly suspicious, if I were suspicious of anything, because I can't feel. And then we get, I think it's the last, but now one more page after this. One page of the mystery guy in the burlap sack all tied up. He's just sitting there, and then a voice off panel says soon, and then we see him smiling through the burlap sack. So that's happening. So anyway, then we cut back to Cyborg, who is still being fixed up by his father at Star Labs. And he's super sad about it. He's like, oh, all of this is because of me. This is, I sent him into this world. It's so horrible of me. But then he makes the point of saying, the heroes had to win all the time. The villains only had to win once, and they did. And that's when Cyborg speaks up and says, no, they didn't win, not yet. So he's still alive, and it says next time, Cyborg 2.0. So Cyborg's coming back, and he's going to be even more powerful than before. How powerful was he before? I don't know. They didn't ever really do anything with him. So, yeah. Solid issue. It's essentially just backstory. This is really just a tie-in. I mean, it's actually labeled as a tie-in. It's a Forever Evil tie-in, clearly. But, like, it's more so just, hey, let's figure out the stories of Grid, Johnny Quick, Atomica, Power Ring, and Deathstorm. And then also leading this little trail of, oh, there's something special about Superwoman and the mystery burlap sack guy as well. So, all in all, it's a well-written issue. I don't think there's any problem with it, but it is totally skippable. There is no need to read, like, any part of this whatsoever. But I think that's what you get going into it. I think that's to be expected for a tie-in, really. So overall, I'm going to say this one is probably... I'll give it a 7. And honestly, I think that's mainly because I felt that the Powering and the Johnny Quick and Atomica stories were just a bit too long. I think they padded them out just a bit too much of saying, look how evil they really are. So, yeah, I could have taken a little less of that, but the rest of it was all fine. And even those stories were fine, just a bit too long. So 7 for this. And that's it. That's all the comics from DC Comics this December 25th, 2013. But, of course, 2 comics does not an episode make. I need to give you more. I am in a giving mood, and that's probably the holiday season, but it's also because I'm pretty sure most people don't like it when a podcast episode is only like 20 minutes. I think they usually like longer. So, here's what I'm going to do for you. Because it's the holiday season, and because I'm technically calling this a 5th week, and this is what I do on every 5th week, I'm going to read you some backup stories. Now, for those of you who don't know what backup stories are, I've defined this numerous times, but they are the stories after the main stories in a comic book. Why do they have 2 stories? Usually to charge an extra $1 when you're checking out the comic, but also because sometimes they have something to say. So this time around, I've collected the past 2 months' worth of backup stories, and I have exactly 4 of them. To put that into perspective, I think the biggest month I had was like 15, maybe more. So, yeah, this isn't going to take very long either. But you're going to want to stick around because... Okay, I got nothing on this one. Backup stories are usually pretty skippable, but some of them are entertaining. So what do we have around this time? We've got a backup story for Batman, a backup story for Detective Comics, a backup story for Action Comics, and a backup story for Green Arrow. Mind you, most of these, in fact all of them, came from issues 25 of their respective series, and I've already covered the issue 26, so some of them are going to be referencing things that have already been dealt with. Just accept that. That's just the way it's got to be. I'm very sorry. The timing is all wrong. This whole episode, the timing is all wrong. But hey, we do what we have to for the holiday season. Anyway, I have nothing more to say. Let's get right on into whatever the first backup I decide is. People in the Dark, written by Scott Snyder and James Tynion IV, art by Andy Clarke. This is the backup story to Batman 25, and it is essentially just a story about little baby Harper Row and her brother Cullen. So we have the blackout going on across Gotham City, and Harper's father is basically saying, like, yeah, I'm going to head out and go get a drink down at the bar because this place kind of sucks. And Harper is like maybe 7 years old at this point. Like, she's super, I guess she should be like 11 or so if this is 5-6 years ago, and she's like 16 or 17 now. But like, she looks like she's 6 or 7. And Cullen's there and he's crying, and she's like, hey, you can't leave because Cullen's afraid of the dark. And he's like, so what do you want? It's a blackout across the city. What do you want me to do about it? And she's like, well, I brought home a battery and a book on circuitry. Yeah, you should be able to hook it up because you're a grown-up. And he's just like, you know what? Maybe it'll do the kid some good to be in the dark for a while. You know, maybe he can grow a backbone. And immediately Harper basically just calls out her dad, just being like, why are we even here? Why couldn't we just go live with mom? This sucks. We hate it here. And he's just like, hey, don't talk to me like that. I'm your father, and you don't even want to know what your mom's up to. So he slams the door, tells him just go to sleep. And Harper leads Cullen back into the bedroom. And essentially he's, terrified and whatnot, but she tucks him into bed and reminds him of a camping trip they went to back with their grandmother. And it was out, they were in a tent, and it was just out in the backyard, but the flashlight went out, and Cullen was so afraid of the dark, and Harper talked him down and said, hey, it's only scary because you can't see me, but I'm always here. I'm always right there for you. And we see her crack open the circuitry book that she checked out, and she like starts picking at the wires to the lamp, and she says like, hey, yeah, also like everyone right now is afraid. It's okay to be afraid because out there in the city, like there are grown-ups literally punching each other over like beer. Like it's awful out there. But you have to also remember there are special people out there who are going to make everything better. And this is essentially just like the teaser for the entire 0 Year tie-in line. We see Batman, but then on the sides we also see panels for Jason Todd. We see Catwoman, Green Arrow, Batwing, Superman, Flash, Nightwing, Batwoman, Green Lanterns, all of them. And the narration is just like, oh yeah, you just got to remember they're out there and also read their books. So at that point we see Harper saying, also, if you remember how that night ended, you were afraid of the dark, but like I was afraid to leave the tent and try to get back to grandma's house because I didn't know the way. But you led me there. You were the one who remembered. You were brave. And she flips on the light, shows that she managed to hook it up to the battery. And Cullen's like, how did you do that? And she's like, oh, I just read the whole book before I even got home. Like, it wasn't that hard. And he's like, oh, you might be smarter than dad. And she's like, I know I'm smarter than dad. Anyway, are you good? Are you ready to go to sleep? And he's like, I think you can turn the light off. I don't think I need it. And she smiles, turns off the light, gives him a kiss goodnight, and they say I love you to each other. And that's the backup story. That's literally all it is. Cute little tale. I really do like it, but it does definitely... It's a 2-page spread where we see that sort of, here's everything else going across the DC universe, and here's all these little things along the side. It feels so much like an ad. It feels like it's just 100% like, hey, by the way, all of these are purchasable at your local comic shop now. So a little bit off on that. But in regards to the rest of the story, it's a good little heartfelt message. I think it's nice. It's always nice to see this duo of Harper and Cullen getting a little time to explore and get a little bit more backstory built up for them. Because obviously Scott does have some sort of a plan as to what he wants to do there. Overall, I'd say this one's probably 6.5. I know I was like saying really good things about it, and then I came down pretty hard there, but the fact that that 2-page spread is essentially a third of the book just saying, here, buy our other books, it does deduct quite heavily. But the rest of it's fine. It's not a bad read overall, so that's why it's above an average. Troubled Waters, written by John Layman, art by Jorge Lucas. This is the backup story to Detective Comics number 25. And if you remember Detective Comics 25, it was the 0 Year issue that explored, hey, what was Gordon up to the night of 0 Year, the big storm that was coming through. And a big part of it was he got thrown off a bridge and was rescued by Batman. So this backup story has a Gordon and another cop named Officer Wallace, who, according to the book, has been involved in the book, like the main story, for several issues. I barely remember him. So they came across a man who jumped off of the bridge, and they say, yep, apparently he just stopped his car, he walked over the edge, and he jumped off. It was a cut and dry suicide. But now that the body is down on the shore here and they're investigating, it's nothing but a skeleton. And Gordon's like, does this look like a cut and dry suicide to you? And Wallace is like, well, no, but like it would have been a suicide. So at that point, Wallace is like, all right, let me tell you what the rest of the witnesses saw when they saw this guy jump. They said that he jumped off, and then all of a sudden it looked like there was a shadow swooping down, and the shadow was shaped like a bat. And immediately one of the other rookie cops chimes in saying, like, I bet it was the Batman or one of his rookie little Batman Jr. or whatever. And immediately Wallace is just like, Jesus Christ, I used to be against the Batman, but you sound like an idiot, so I'm glad I'm not on your side here. It's never anything associated with the Batman. Also, the witnesses said they heard tearing, ripping, screaming, and they saw hundreds of tiny other little bats attacking. So at that point, Gordon is like, all right, fair enough. Hey, what happened to your face, dude? And Wallace shows he's got these big gash marks covered up with a bandage on his face. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, I came down here when the body was found. We were like roping it off. There were some other people like trying to crowd around, see what was going on. And there was one guy who was having the jitters, and I recognized him. It was Kirk Langstrom, the dude who helped with the man-bat stuff. And he was like freaking out, and I was like, hey man, you cool? And he was like, oh, it was her, I knew it was her, I have to stop her. And then he started like seeming like he was having some sort of panic attack. So I went over, I made a judgment call, I was going to bring him in, but as I went to move him, all of a sudden he resisted as he transformed into the giant man-bat form, slashed Officer Wallace's face, and flew away. And Gordon's like, I'm sorry, you said flew away? And it's like, yes, he flew away. It's like, all right, well, this is outside of our jurisdiction now. Come back with me to GCPD. We got to go up to the roof. So they go up to the roof, and Gordon gives Wallace permission to activate the bat signal. And he's like, oh, are you sure? I've never done this before. He's like, nah, you've earned it. So he flips it on, bat signals in the sky, and he's like, all right, what do we do now? He's like, now we just wait. He doesn't usually take that long. And so there's a little beat panel, and then it wraps up with Wallace saying, like, one of these days you're going to have to tell me how you came up with the idea for a giant light to summon the bat. And he's like, yeah, maybe I will. So, yeah. Obviously, this ties in the very next issue after that. Issue 26 was just kind of wrapping up the Man-Bat story. So this is a little linking period between the two. And then it also does a good job of tying up this sort of theming that we had from issue 25, which was, Gordon was thrown from the bridge and then he was saved by Batman. Here is literally the exact opposite, where a man jumped off a bridge and he was killed by Man-Bat. So I like it. I think it's a nice solid theming throughout. It did a good job linking into the next thing as well. This is the kind of thing the backup stories I feel like should be. It's not necessary to read it, but it only adds to both the story being told overall and whatever it is you just finished reading. So, I mean, overall, I got to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I don't think it quite does enough individually as like an amazing story, but contextually with everything else going on, it's very good. So definitely check it out if you haven't gotten a chance. Lunch Break, written by Greg Pak, art by Scott McDaniel and Aaron Kuder. This is the backup story to Action Comics number 25, and it's essentially just a quick little snippet of, hey, Clarke, back in his early days, back before he really became Superman, his powers are still developing, and here's just him on a general lunch break out in Metropolis, and he remarks on how it's beautiful out, he's eating a sandwich, but the super hearing, his ability to just sense all this stuff around him, is only growing stronger and stronger, and he's able to hear not everything in the world yet, but everything in the city. And he sees a man trying to break into an apartment, and he pulls out a gun. He sees a woman not paying attention as she crosses the street and almost gets hit by a car, and he sees a homeless man who is just asking for any sort of help, any sort of food or money that can be handed to him. And he's just like, now that's just it. That's just my city. That's all I can see. But being Superman, like, I can't just turn a blind eye. I got to do what I can, like, all the time. So we see this man break into an apartment. All of a sudden, his gun starts superheating, seemingly because of heat vision. We see Clarke blow just like a tiny little like poo off to the side, which is enough for this woman to get pushed out of the way of the car. And then we see him get up and hand his lunch bag and some money over to the homeless guy. And he's like, most people think like I know what I'm doing all the time. Like I've got this perfect sense of right and wrong, but like, no, I'm just trying to like fumble my way through the day. I'm doing what feels right. Just going by my own basic sense of morality here. And he comments on how Jimmy thinks that he's on his phone playing Sudoku all the time, but actually he's on an app called Anon Metro, which is essentially people anonymously reporting these different crimes and bad things happening around the city so that he's able to see what's going on and try to help. So that's all that. But then at certain point, he feels a tremble through his feet. He leans down and touches the pavement. And as he feels it, there's this huge seismic activity that he's able to pick up way on the other side of the planet. And he's able to feel it the whole way through. And we just get a little teasing image of like 3 different shadowy figures that say finally. I don't know. They're there. And then we do get a 1-page little thing here of Lana Lang, who is currently on an engineering gig in Venezuela. They are running a drill that she's supposed to be safety checking, but they aren't letting her safety check it because they're like, you're new here and you're a woman, so just let the old-timer men handle this. We know our way around this. And immediately it like explodes, and Lana says, I hate to say I told you so. And then all of a sudden this giant monster comes up and she says, oh, but what in the hell is that? So that leads directly into Action Comics number 26, where we find out exactly what that monster was. So yeah, no, it's, as for the lunch break stuff, it's a nice little story of just like, yeah, here's Superman, early days, just him trying to save people however he can, even when he's not Superman yet. He's still just being a cool dude. Solid story. As for the last page thing with Lana, it's a good setup for the next issue to like get you to come back, but I mean, it's kind of useless on its own. You know, it doesn't even feel like it's part of the same story. It feels like something completely separate. So as much as it is an okay story when it's in Action Comics 26, it doesn't feel that great here. So I kind of got to dock some points for that. But all in all, it's an perfectly suitable story. It's perfectly fine. I'd say it's a 6.5. Like, it's nothing great. It's not blowing me out of the water, but there's only so much you can do in a couple of pages. And I think this is a really good little snapshot of early days Superman before he realized, oh, wait, I can go full hero all the time. New Tricks, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Dennis Cowan. This is the backup story to Green Arrow number 25. And of course, that was the 0-year tie-in where Green Arrow showed up in Gotham to save his mom, and Andy Diggle was acting as her bodyguard. So this is a few weeks after that, and Andy is currently sitting in his apartment. I'll call him Diggle. That sounds better than Andy. So Diggle is sitting in his apartment, reading the paper, and he's drinking tons of alcohol, and he sees stories about how there is a vigilante around Seattle, and he's just like, man, whole world of costumes out there now. People are springing up all over the place. First Gotham, now here. I don't even know where an old dog like me fits in anymore. So all of a sudden the window crashes open. Diggle draws his gun, and we see that it is Green Arrow, Oliver, standing inside being like, Diggle, hey, need your help. And he just collapses, just leaking blood all over the place. So Oliver comes to, and Diggle's got him patched up. He's got some stitches in him, and he's just like, hey man, thanks for saving me. It's great. And Diggle's like, yeah, sure. Pours himself another drink, and he's like, so what happened to you, and why did you end up bleeding out in my apartment? And Green Arrow explains, like, yeah, I got careless. I was staking out a building. I thought there were only 2 guys in there, but then a lot more jumped me. And yeah, it didn't work out like I hoped it was. And Diggle's like, yeah, okay, that's great, but that's not what specifically I was talking about. I was talking more about, like, you were presumed dead, and then you show up in Gotham playing superhero, and now you've continued doing so? How did you get here, and why did you come to me? And he's just like, and the whole time he's calling him Mr. Queen. And he's just like, no, let's drop the formalities. You can call me Oliver. But he points out how during the 0-year thing, how Diggle was willing to protect his mom with his life. He was willing to go that extra mile. And also, even after being revealed to Diggle never went to the press, never said, Oliver Queen is alive and he was right here. It's something that Oliver trusts in him. He trusts to be able to keep that secret. And he says that he needs Diggle. And Diggle's like, needs for what? What could I possibly do? And he's just like, well, I need you to back me up. Like you guys like you and me, we can't shoot lasers from our eyes. We can't bench press mountains. Have only what we are able to work with. And I think that you have a lot to work with. And he's like, no, I'm just a normal guy. He's like, no, you're not. I've done my research. You are ex-military. You did 2 tours in Afghanistan. You're a Green Beret. Like, yeah, you're great. And he's like, yeah, well, that was wartime. It's like, this is wartime. Have you seen the city? Have you seen the country? Everything's going to hell. I need someone to help me fight against it. And Diggle's like, okay, well, what makes you think I want that? And he's like, because you're on your 3rd bottle of bourbon and it's not even Wednesday. Dude, you waiting for something big to happen. You want something bigger than yourself. Just join me. Help me out. And so 3 days pass, and we see that they are in the Arrow Cave. I don't know if they actually call it that, but it's the Arrow Cave. And he's like, yep, all right, this place is secure. No one's going to be able to find us. And by day, you will act as your normal security gig at Queen Industries, but by night, you'll be helping me out. And Diggle points out, like, the costume and the bow and all that. He's like, yeah, I'm not using one of those, and I'm not wearing that. And he's like, no, that's fine, but, like, does that mean you're in? And he's like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's do it. So they shake hands, and it says for basically a full year, they took charge of Seattle. They were the men who were going out there and making a difference. They were taking out crime behind the scenes. And it felt great. Diggle was happy to have that in his life, but eventually something came and changed it all. And one day, as he's working on a punching bag, a new person walks in, sneaks in. Diggle flips around, is about to throw fists, but then Oliver comes in and says, easy, easy. Andy Diggle, I would like you to meet Roy Harper, our new partner. And that's where Diggle says, this wasn't the beginning. It was the beginning of the end. So I'm curious to see if we're going to get that. I'd love to see we finally get the full elaboration on, like, how exactly this all fell apart between Green Arrow and whether he's called Arsenal or Red Arrow at that point. I'm not sure. But regardless, seems like it's an interesting story being told. So overall, decent enough backup. It sets up Diggle as this major character now. They already kind of did that in the main book, but I do like having this extra little backstory to him. And obviously they set up the Roy Harper stuff as well. So overall, I'd say this is a solid, I'll give it a 7. I can't say the art style really did anything for me one way or the other. It's just good art style. It just didn't impress me that much. One thing that really threw me for a loop, though, is that the entire time Oliver has his beard back. Why? I mean, I get it, but, like, it's even a year later. Why did he shave it? Why was it gone? I missed that beard. But anyway, yeah, this is like a 7. It's very good, just not quite amazing. And that's it. Again, that is literally everything that I could talk about up to and including December 25th, 2013, which, I mean, have we even hit an hour yet? I feel like this is still really short, all things considered. But as I said at the beginning, I've got one more ace up my sleeve. One more thing I swore I would never do, but finally this time has come. So the whole basis of this show is I review things in real time. 10 years late, but in real time. So if a comic comes out in January, it's reviewed in January. Unfortunately, I looked at next month's schedule. And I know I shouldn't be looking ahead. I should let it surprise me. But I had to, because next month has a week where they decided, okay, we've got the full amount of comics that are supposed to come out this week. Great, awesome. But hey, last month, there was that weird week where we only put out 2 comics. Maybe we should have put out these annuals around then. Oh well, too late for that. Then they shoved in 5 annuals on a week that was already full, making for 18 comics in 1 week, 5 of which are annuals. Now, for those of you who are not that good at basic math, that essentially equates to like 23 normal length comics I would have had to read. That's way too much. I can't fit that in an episode. So, if you'll excuse a little bit of editing magic, I'm going to do something now. For those of you on the audio version, nothing will have changed. Everything is functionally identical. But for those of you on the video version, you will now see that we are no longer in episode 121. No. I have jumped 1 month ahead into the future to pull comics from that massive-ass week, and we're going to be doing them now because screw it, why not? Also, speaking ahead in the future now, into late January, hoo boy, you guys are not ready. That first month was a doozy. Everything gets so much worse. But then again, that's not really a prediction that requires any sort of foresight. Everything always just gets so much worse nowadays. Am I right? Anyway, let's talk about the comics I'm pulling ahead. So I made sure to only select ones that you don't need any sort of real backstory for. So you can essentially read these out of order. And in doing so, I only got 3. So we're going to be pulling 3 comics ahead, and those are all annuals. So we've got the Batman and Robin annual number 2, the World's Finest annual number 1, and Earth 2 annual number 2. Out of those, there's actually one thing I do need to mention that's special, and that is World's Finest annual. That is actually a prelude to an event / crossover, more of a crossover, that's going on between it and Batman / Superman, called First Contact. So check that out. I bet it'll be important. But regardless, we're going to start things off as we always do with our good old Bat books. Batman and Robin Annual Number 2, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Doug Mahnke and Patrick Gleason. This is a flashback to Robin week 1, but it has a little bit of a framing device to it. So we pick up in Gotham a couple months ago when Tynion was still alive, and Nightwing's just sitting on a rooftop talking to Damian, and is sharing the story of a guy named Tusk, some sort of villain that he went up against. And he's like, oh yeah, no, did I ever tell you my first run-in with him? It was crazy, and it made Batman realize. And Damian's just like, dude, Grayson, shut up. Well, every single one of your things is trying to impart like some sort of moral. You're already in your 30s. And Grayson's like, hey, I'm just trying to help you be Robin. It's a big responsibility. And Damian's like, look, you may have invented the idea of being Robin, but I perfected it. So then we cut to present day. Bruce is climbing up in the crawl space of a ceiling, and he comes across a note that says, The Robin Cave. No Batmen or butlers allowed. And as he crawls his way back there, he finds a little box inside, and he calls down to Alfred and say, hey, call Dick, get him to show up. So some time passes. Dick comes to Wayne Manor. He shows up, and everyone's just sitting in the library, just chilling, waiting for him to show up. He's like, oh, I thought this was a Bat-associated thing. I wouldn't have worn my uniform underneath my street clothes otherwise. And he's like, oh, hey, look, it's great to... And this is Alfred talking, mind you. He's like, look, it's great to have you from Chicago. So nice that you could join us. But, yeah, we've got something. And so Bruce tosses him a box, and attached to it is a note saying, payback for Grayson telling me that long, boring story about his first week as Robin. And Dick just smiles down at it, and Bruce is like, all right, what do you know about this? What's going on? I didn't open it. I respected his privacy, but tell me everything you know now. And he's just like, oh, yeah, no, I was just telling him about the first week that I was your partner as Robin. And he's like, okay, well, you must have left some sort of impression for Damian to do some long-term planning like this. So what is it? And he's like, look, I'll tell you the story, but I'll tell you exactly as I told him. But you got to remember, I'm adding some flair to it. I'm a natural showman. So immediately it starts off with them swinging through the city, and he says, yeah, that night happened, but the build up to it, the very first night was the second longest day of my life. And we see him at a high school, and he's just sitting there bored as hell throughout all of his lessons, barely listening to anything. And then finally, when the bell rings, he sprints his way out, jumps into the limousine where Alfred is waiting, and just like, all right, we're doing it. Tonight's the night, Alfred. Tonight's the night I finally start with him. And he's just like, yes, it's great. I can only contain my excitement so much. And so they start heading their way home. And he says, oh, by the way, I've got a new costume picked out. And we see it's essentially the disco suit for Nightwing. And he's like, yeah, so what do you think? And Bruce is immediately like, no, absolutely not. Our entire thing is sticking to the shadows, not about drawing out their attention, okay? So where's your old costume? Why not wear that one? He's like, oh, well, I wanted something that like inspired more with the Flying Graysons, you know? He's like, no, That's the past. This is now. You're not putting on a show. So go ahead and get on your old costume, and then we're out of here. So as they're driving their way to whatever scene they're heading to, he's basically telling Dick, tonight you're a spectator. You will not get involved at all. You are to sit 100 yards away from wherever the hell I am doing my thing, and you're just watching. Do not get involved. Understand? And Dick's like, yeah, got it. I get it. I'm friggin' back. So Batman tells him, all right, look, there's a crew that's hitting these currency exchanges, stealing their money. I got to deal with that, and I've got to lead down by the docks. So heads down to the docks, and we see Batman's just beating up the whole crew of them. Meanwhile, Dick's just sitting off to the side, bored as hell watching, until finally he sees one of the crew members start to escape from Batman and runs down a nearby shipping container. And he hops on the phone, calls up a guy and says, hey, tell Tusk that the Batman came, just like he suspected he would. So at that point, Bruce beats up the last of the gang members, but then turns around and sees Robin there with a gang member in hand and says, hey, you missed one. And Batman immediately freaks out. He's like, what did I tell you? What was our one rule for tonight? You do not get involved. You are a spectator. Get back in the goddamn car. I'm taking you home. And he's just like, what? Well, no, you're not, because then I'm not going to tell you what the gang member said. And he had some very good intel. And then 20 minutes pass and they pull into the Batcave and Batman's like, get out. I'm not kidding. You are not prepared if you're not going to be able to listen to basic orders like that. And he's like, oh, come on, man. I'm 16 years old. I was just trying to. He's like, nope, out. So he argues with Batman, and Batman's basically like, I knew this was a bad idea. I don't need some teenage daredevil out there. I need someone who's going to be a partner and be able to listen to me. And he says, look, I'm sorry. I'll do better next time. He's like, no, you won't. There is no next time. You're fired. And he drives back off out the bat cave. So next morning comes and Dick is like, hey, talking to Alfred, he's like, hey, did Bruce mention anything? He's like, nope, he was pretty quiet on the whole thing. He's like, all right, I'm going to go talk to him. And immediately Alfred's like, no, you are not. We are going to let this one lie. He was very like certain on that. So just wait this one out and you're going to school. And he's like, what? No, come on. He was looking for a reason to try to boot me. This is BS. And Alfred's like, yeah, no, Master Wayne being unreasonable. Who would have thought it? So as they leave, Bruce is actually listening to all of this, and he hears it. We see another boring day pass by at his high school, to which he says, this is the actual longest day of my life. And as Batman is going down to get prepped for that night's patrol, Dick comes down after him, dressed in the Robin gear, and he does the full apology. He's like, look, I get it. It was irresponsible of me. You did give me one order. I know I broke that. So here's what the gang member was going to say. It was, he's going to hit up this certain exchange tonight at 1:20 in the morning. I'm laying all of it out so that you can trust me. And Batman's like, thank you. You're still not coming. And he hops in the car and leaves. So as Dick looks out the window, still dressed in his Robin gear, he's like, all right, screw this. He just jumps out, starts making his way down to the city because he told Batman a certain thing, but in actuality, Dick knew that it was a ruse as well. So he does a little bit of patrolling and comes across a different exchange where Tusk is actually hitting it up. So as he jumps in, he starts laying fists down, beating up all the goons, just making all these puns the whole way through about banks and stock exchanges. And then finally, as he's getting a little bit too cocky, he gets a solid fist to the face, and we meet Tusk, who is literally an elephant man. Just imagine an elephant walking on two legs without a trunk. And that is Tusk. And he's got all this jewelry on him. And he's like, oh, you're just some skinny punk. You're the one who's been messing with me the last few nights. Like, who the hell do you think you are? And then all of a sudden, tangled up in a bunch of bat cable, Batman shows up. He's like, he's my partner. And I figured that the information I was given was just a ruse. So I showed up here instead. So Batman starts trying to fight against Tusk. But Tusk is, again, an elephant. So he lands some solid punches on Batman and actually manages to knock Batman out. And he's like, oh yeah, this is the best Gotham has to offer. Jesus, don't ever come to Brooklyn. So at that point, they got a gun to Robin's head and they force him and the unconscious Batman up onto a helicopter and say, yeah, we're going to toss you out. And he's only talking to Robin at this point. And he's like, yeah, you and your dad. And Robin essentially says, he's not my dad, and I'm not afraid of nothing. So he kicks Tusk in the eye, jumps out of the helicopter by himself, and manages to use his trapeze artistry skills to grab onto like the leg of the helicopter, swoop underneath it back up to the top, and kicks Tusk out the other side, meanwhile managing to crack off one of his tusks. So at that point, Robin grabs one of the other guy's guns, aims it at the pilot of the helicopter, tells him to land, and Batman immediately gets up and he's like, okay, that's far enough. Drop the gun, because that's one thing that I am not going to forgive. I'm willing to forgive the other stuff, though. So they land the helicopter, they get these guys booted up, and Batman's like, yeah, I always knew you were not giving me the whole story. You're a teenager. You're not that hard to read. So Grayson then says, yeah, no, I kept on running on into Tusk over and over again throughout the years. Like, I always saw it as just like some stupid thug I was fighting, but he seemed to really take it personally. And like, he got more and more angry at me specifically over time. But then eventually he just stopped showing up. And I figured either someone else got to him or he managed to get out of the gig. But now I finally know what happened to him. And Dick opens up the box in the modern day story, and inside is Tusk's other Tusk, along with a note saying, hey, old Robin, I got him for you. Let me know if you need any help in the future. Signed, Damian. So Dick raises up the Tusk, says, here's to Damian, and winner and still champion. And we get the same panel we got before with just Batman and Dick, but now Damian's in there as well. So yeah, it's a nice little heartfelt story. It's just a first week of Robin, and it does a good job of tying this in as well to, you know, oh, Damian's dead, and that's a thing that we're still kind of dealing with the reverberations of. It kind of is that sort of feeling of like, you go through the whole traumatic and like getting over the death of a loved one or something like that. And then all of a sudden you find like a single little object that just sets off that, like, not grief, but just those memories again, you know? I feel like this story is that, where we already dealt with all the Damian trauma and all of his grief and all that. But then there's just another thing he came across and he's like, oh, I want to remember this now. I want to know specifically like what my son was going through here. And he has Dick share that with him. It's a good story. Solid storytelling. Overall, I want to give it an 8, but I just can't. I got to give it a 7.5. And I think what that comes down to is that Tusk as a villain, they don't do enough to make me actually like care. But like the whole story is built around me caring that he was someone that Dick couldn't take care of, or like never totally finished up, I guess. I don't know. It just feels like they could have gone a little bit different with that storyline somehow, and it would have worked, but it just didn't here. But still, 7.5 is a great score. It's a fantastic issue. Obviously very skippable, but I would actually go out and read it if you skipped it. It's a solid read all on its own. Earth 2 Annual Number 2, written by Tom Taylor, art by Robson Rocha. So, what's up with Earth 2 Batman? Let's get some backstory on him. So, the entire thing is kind of framed in this story where Earth 2 Batman is talking to Hawkgirl and Red Tornado and saying, hey, you're with me. You should know my backstory because that's important. And we open up in 1979, Gotham in Crime Alley. Thomas Wayne is shot, Martha Wayne is shot, and Bruce is left standing. And as he's bleeding out on the pavement, Thomas leans up to Bruce and says, Bruce, I'm so sorry. And we see Joe Chill standing there and saying, all right, you got lucky, kid, as he walks away into the mist. So cut to 1994, where Batman is already active. He's looking over a body in the morgue, and it's Joe Chill's. He recognizes it, and he's like, yeah, this is the guy who shot my parents. He's dead, and someone beat the ever-loving hell out of him, like super strength levels of beating the hell out of him. So what's going on here? And he has a record of 3 other people that were linked to the Falcone family. They all had the same kind of beating to death. But through all of his investigations, Joe Chill never showed up as related to the Falcone at all. He was just a random shooter. He had nothing connected to any crime families. So at this point, Batman starts theorizing like, okay, well, hold on. Maybe Joe Chill is actually like a gun for hire sort of thing. He is actually smarter than he seems. and he just commits like petty crimes in order to cover up the fact that he is actually this like criminal for hire that the Falcones hired to kill my parents that night. And Alfred's like, yeah, maybe, but like, let's not bank on that because that seems really far-fetched. Maybe you're just looking for like a conspiracy theory here. And he's like, fine, whatever. But regardless, in order to get the clues to this case, I got to go talk to the Falcone family. So he just walks right up to their house. And Alfred's like, you know that place is like a fortress, right? And he's like, yeah, that's why I trained with the League of Shadows for all those years. Like, I'm going to be able to get in. So he does. He immediately gets in and he injects Frankie Falcone, seemingly the head of the family to some extent, with a truth serum of sodium whatever. And he's like, all right, I'm going to take my hand off your mouth. You better not scream or it's going to end very badly for you. Got it? And Batman just immediately gets down to business. He's like, all right, what do you know about the others? And he's like, well, I thought you were the one killing them. Isn't that why you're here, to kill me? And he's like, no, I'm Batman. I don't kill. So also, Frankie's like reaching around behind his pillow, and Batman's like, don't worry about that. I already took the gun from under your pillow before I walked in. He's like, all right, fine, whatever. So Batman straight up says, 3 of your guys are dead. They had their heads like crushed in, basically. What is their relation with Joe Chill? And Frankie's like, what do you mean, Joe Chill? We only used Joe that one time. There's only one time we used him, and that was for that traitorous punk named Thomas Wayne. And he also explains that Joe Chill is actually a professional who only works with different clients once, so there is no paper trailer pattern. So Frankie knew Thomas, and we see 1971, Frankie got shot twice in a drive-by. He had seemingly a lover named Alberto, and as he's bleeding out on the sidewalk, and Alberto is crying out for help, Thomas Wayne shows up, and he's like, hey, I'm a student. I'm going to be a doctor soon. Let me take care of him. And he starts like tearing off his jacket, getting cloth strips, and he starts doing a medical analysis. He's like, all right, the bullets went through and through. Everything should be fine. We got to apply pressure here. Just do that. I'm going to get an ambulance to show up here. So 1 month later, Thomas is in Frankie's room as an actual doctor, and he's like, oh, yes, glad to see you're doing well, Frankie. And Frankie's like, hey, you saved my life. I owe you a debt. I'm going to throw a party in your honor, and I want you to show up. And he's like, I really do not want to get involved in all that. And he's like, no, I promise you it'll be fantastic. All you need to do is show. So later that week, the party happens, and we see Thomas is accompanied by his butler, Jarvis Pennyworth. So Jarvis is like, sir, this doesn't seem like a good idea. And Tommy's like, yeah, well, it's just a little thing, may as well check it out. So he goes in, Frankie welcomes him, and inside is like 100 different girls. It looks like a full band and like just a full party. And this woman walks up saying, oh, what do we have here? And Frankie's immediately like, oh, this man saved my life. He's a doctor. And you know what that means? He's good with his hands. And the blonde woman's like, oh, it's so creepy and inappropriate, Tommy, or Frankie, get out of here. So Tommy introduces him, Frankie introduces Tommy, says, Tommy, this is Martha. So they get to talking, and yeah, essentially they all become close friends. Not just Tommy and Martha, but Frankie and Alberto as well. And it seems that Alberto, at a certain point, dies of a drug overdose. Thomas actually manages to supply some drugs from his hospital to the Falcone crime family. But then eventually 1973 comes around, and Thomas and Martha have a baby boy named Bruce. And Martha basically says, yeah, we got to stay away from Tommy. We need to give a better life for our son. So Tommy goes, or I should say Thomas at this point, Thomas goes over to Frankie and says, hey, I'm out. I'm leaving this behind. We need to straighten our life out. And Frankie essentially threatens him, saying like, hey, I've got dirt on you. You're not just out like that. This is a business now. And Thomas just punches him in the face and says, and I've got more dirt on you. If you ever do anything to hurt me or my family, I will tell everyone everything. And you have so much more to lose. So Frankie basically is telling Batman, yeah, I couldn't have him threatening me, so I sent some guys to send a message. But it was the 3 guys who had their heads caved in recently. And when they went to send the message and beat the crap out of Thomas, Jarvis showed up and essentially interrupted the whole thing. And he started beating the crap out of these three guys anyway. So Frankie's out of options. He had to hire Joe Chill, and the rest is history. So at this point, he hears banging noises downstairs. Batman pulls Frankie out of bed, ties him up to a radiator, and says, "You're not going to get out of here. I'm going to take you to prison. But first, I'm going to protect you from whoever's here to kill you." And he's like, "You can't. What if he gets through you?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen." So he goes down and he sees this masked man in a balaclava just shooting people, squeezing their heads until they pop. And Batman jumps down and immediately tries disarming this guy. But the guy in the mask is like, "Yeah, no, that's not going to work on me. I'm something more than you want." And I don't know what kind of costume freaks Falcone is hiring, but like, screw you, dude. And he immediately throws Batman across the room, just shatters him into a staircase. So the guy in a mask cries out, saying like, "Hey, I know you're here, Frankie. I'm going to come and get you." And Batman stumbles to his feet and be like, "Look, I get it. I'm not hired by Falcone. I'm here to bring him to justice. Like, I have a feeling I know who you are." And all of the hints in this hint that it's Jarvis Pennyworth. And he's like, "Look, he's not going to get away with this. I'm going to bring him to justice, but like, you can't kill him. That's not the way I let things happen." And he basically gets backhanded by the guy in the mask, who then bails out of the building, but Batman manages to land a tracker on him. And the tracker leads him back to Crime Alley, where Alfred is saying, "Yeah, I can't pin down exactly what apartment building he's in, but he's around there." So Bruce does a little bit of looking around, figures out where he is, and says, "Hey, Alfred, I think I know who this is. When was the last time you saw your father?" And he was like, "Oh, a few years ago in England. Why?" And we get up into the apartment, and we see this older guy is injecting himself with some sort of drug, and then Batman shows up behind him and says, "Jarvis Pennyworth." Guy flips around, shoots a gun, shoots Batman in the chest. Batman goes out through the window, and our man has him by the collar and says like, "Oh, how do you know that name? Tell me how." And like Batman's struggling to hold consciousness, and he's like, "Oh, tell me how you know it." And Batman's eyes light up, and he's like, "No, I saw you die, Dad." And then Thomas realizes, "Oh, wait, Bruce, that's you? Jesus." So Thomas pulls him inside, pulls out the bullet and stitches him up, and just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Bruce. I didn't know it was you, but you're going to be fine. Everything's fine now." And Bruce just doesn't say anything for a while, until finally he's like, "I watched you die, man. What? And he's like, "Yeah, I know." He's like, "Do you have any idea what that did to me? Like, I became Batman. Like, that's what that did to me. Everything I dedicate myself is a lie if you're still alive." And Thomas is basically like, "Look, let me explain." He's like, "Don't bother. I got the story from Frankie. Like, I know how it went." And then let me guess. After that, you woke up in a hospital, but you convinced some of your fellow doctors to let you continue to be dead. And then you went on the run thinking that it would be for my benefit because otherwise Frankie would come after me, right? And he's like, "Yeah, no, exactly. Like, it was to let you live." And he's like, "No, it's crap. You had an entire fortune. You could have easily run away. We could have gone anywhere, but you left me to think my parents were both dead. And on top of that," and he points to the syringe, "you're a junkie." And he's like, "Look, it's called Miraclo. It gives me like superhuman strength, but only for an hour. It's from this guy named Rex Tyler that I know. I just use it enough that I get back at Frankie, and then I get clean. I get my life back." And Bruce is like, "You don't get your life back. You threw that life away. It's gone now." And he's like, "Please, Bruce, I'm your father." And he's like, "No, you don't get to be a father. You died. You're now just a selfish bastard." And Batman grabs his stuff, walks out of the room, and just says like, "I'm trained to see the very worst in people, but like, I don't even have to look that hard to see it in you. Whatever you tell yourself to sleep at night is just wrong. You gave up a life with me to get a life of revenge instead." So at that point, seems that Bruce didn't go back for Frankie Falcone. Thomas ends up showing up in his house, and he's like, "I have pictured this moment for 6 years, and I've had so much I want to say, but I'm tired, and I just had everything taken away from me, so just die." And he squeezes the guy's head until he dies. So cut to modern day. Like I said, he's telling this all to Hawkgirl in Red Tornadoes, saying, "Look, that's the kind of man I am. If you still want to follow me, so be it, but like, you deserve to know that much." And Lois, who's inside the red tornado body, is like, I knew Bruce. He never mentioned you. And he's like, no, he wouldn't, because every time I tried to like make amends, and I didn't try that much, but every time I did, he would send me away. I wouldn't be allowed in his life. But I did keep tabs. I was there when he got married. I saw my grandchild, Helena, born. I even watched her grow up, but I always had to do it from afar. I was never part of their life. He would never let me be. And then finally, one day, he ended up dying while fighting against Darkseid, or Darkseid's army, I should say. And that's when I realized the only way that I could do something for Bruce is by honoring his memory, by becoming the Batman. So at that point, Lois points out, okay, but you still need to take that drug, right? You're back on it again. And he's like, yeah, I got myself clean for a while, but I'm back on it to be Batman. And I am probably addicted. That is a thing that is happening. But you know what? I'm old. I'm 65. I got no one to disappoint anymore. So screw it. And he just walks away. So yeah, that's the backstory of Earth 2 Batman. It's Thomas Wayne because Flashpoint did a thing. I'm down with it. It's a solid backstory. It is strange to me, the idea that this isn't like a resurrection. He was just always alive. He was just like planning his revenge in the shadows. So yeah, I'm not opposed to that. It's just I always assumed that if Thomas Wayne were to come back, it would be some sort of resurrection story rather than just, no, he never died in the first place. Beyond that, I mean, it's a solid issue. I do enjoy the writing of it. It does kind of get a bit bogged down, and I don't like the fact that Martha was introduced through Frankie, and then like Frankie had a loved one who just died off. Like that kind of just gets bogged down in the details a little bit. It does add character, but it's just a bit too much going on for seemingly no reason. So overall, I think it's going to get I'll give it a 7.5. It's a low 7.5, but it's a 7.5. I feel comfortable giving it that. But yeah, no, it's just a nice little cutaway to say, here's the origin, and then we continue on with the story as is. World's Finest Annual Number 1, written by Paul Levitz, art by Diogenes Neves. This is a prelude to the First Contact crossover between World's Finest and Batman/Superman, I believe. So this is essentially just a flashback story to, hey, what were Robin and Supergirl doing on Earth 2 prior to literally all of the Darkseid War? And it's told in 3 chapters. So chapter 1, titled Independence, is Robin doing an early days mission with Batman. It seems to be actually like her first mission with her father. And they bust into this brothel that's just in the middle of this neighborhood. And the women are obviously being sex trafficked in. So they're there to rescue them. And it turns out that this place is also Catwoman, who in this universe is married to Batman, had died here. Like this was her final place before she ended up being killed. So this is they're doing this in order to complete Catwoman's final mission. So immediately to jump in, they're met by gunfire. Batman uses cape to shield Robin, and then it's just a full-on punch-out as best they can. So they take out all the different goons, and Batman is like, look, I don't like the fact that your mom trained you to do this behind my back, but like if you're gonna do it, I need you to do it right. Could be like booby traps literally anywhere. Just always stay on your toes. So she ends up seeing a woman sneaking down some stairs, and she's like, oh, hey, I'm here to help you. And the woman starts running, and she's like, okay, well, I guess I can always cut her off. So she jumps down the stairs, gets in the way, and says, hey, stop running. Everything's going to be fine. But then a man jumps her from behind, hits her in the head with like a billy club, and turns out that this girl was actually just working with the guy who was sex trafficking her. So they all start making their way down the hallway, and Robin's like, oh, that's stupid. I'm glad my dad didn't see that, but like I'm going to need some bat aspirin after that. So she starts making her way down the hall. Meanwhile, it turns out Batman did see it, and she's like, all right, I'm giving her space. She's able to make those mistakes because it's like she's not stabbed, so let's see how she recovers. So he follows at a distance. As she makes her way back into this back room, she sneaks in and she's like, all right, there's a few guys with guns. Take them out first and then deal with the rest. So she throws some of her custom made, not batarangs, but like, kunai sort of things, throws them into the hands of the guys holding guns, manages to get a jump on them. And as one of them pulls out another gun, she pulls out a fire stick poker and just drives it through the guy. Like, he's dead. There's no way around that. And so she gives chase to the rest of the people who are running out of the room. Batman follows up and just like, okay, yeah, she gets this part from her mom, but like, I'm not going to try to hold that back, but maybe we could help with that a little bit. So he follows her down, up a few more stairs until turns out there was a building that he didn't see on recon. So this isn't all according to his plan. This isn't all safe on her end. So he goes through expecting the worst, but he finds that she manages to have all of them pinned down, including the sex trafficked women who are essentially fighting back against her. And she's just like, I don't get it. Why is she fighting against me? Like, I'm trying to help. And Batman's like, okay, well, let me explain to you what Stockholm Syndrome is. And that's where it leaves off. So chapter 2 is Supergirl, titled Rebellion. And Supergirl is writing in her diary about how she messed up really, really bad. So in the Earth 2 universe, she is not allowed to go out or be seen by anybody because they know that a war with Apocalypse is coming and they want to keep Supergirl as the ace up their sleeve. So she's basically just locked away all the time. But right now, Superman is off doing something and he's too busy to keep an eye on Kara. So she decides, hey, there's like a whole big political thing going on in DC, in New York. So I should be able to sneak in and nobody would even know that I'm not supposed to belong here. So she goes to a club with a fake ID. A bunch of guys are hitting on her and she's just not having any of it until finally she comes across a man at a bar named Ken. And she introduces herself, they share a drink, and soon enough they go outside the bar, they start walking down by the riverside, and they share a kiss. And she's just like, oh man, that was great. I love that. This is fantastic. So they all start getting a little bit like shy around each other. And then finally, Ken opens up and says, hey, look, I should have told you, my dad is the leader of Gamora. He's here for this political thing, and we're going to have to leave tomorrow. So like, this isn't a continuing thing. And Supergirl's like, yeah, I probably should have told you the truth sooner. And then all of a sudden the building explodes. And Ken points out, like, wait a minute, that's the world government building. That's where my dad is. I gotta go. I gotta see. And he takes Kara and says, look, you'll be safe here in this building. It's super sturdy. It's like a bathroom. It's super sturdy. I'll come back for you. You'll be safe here. And Kara's like, oh, that's so sweet. He thinks I need protecting. So Ken goes, he kisses her, he runs off. And then Supergirl's like, okay, people need help. I know I'm supposed to be a secret weapon and not be seen, but like, people need help. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get changed in my costume, and then I'm going to move really, really, really fast. So fast that nobody can tell that I'm not Superman. They're just going to see the blur of covers and think that I'm him. Cool, great, awesome. So she starts zooming in back and forth, trying to like stop debris from falling on people. She tosses it out into the ocean. She tries like getting some of it reattached to the building. And then all of a sudden in the middle of it, she catches a glimpse of like a female figure that just immediately disappears. And she's like, that's weird, but I have no time to focus on it. So she continues trying to do that. And then finally, as she's kind of wrapping up, she hears Ken going back to the bathroom where she was supposed to be. And a whole bunch of debris is heading towards it as well. So Kara moves as fast as she can, trying to stop it, but she's not fast enough. And as she clears out the rubble, she finds Ken is dead inside. So chapter 3 is the pair of them. Supergirl came over to talk to Helena after all that happened. Helena is able to hack into nearby security cams and stuff like that. She makes sure to wipe clean any trace of Supergirl where she wasn't moving fast enough. And she basically just comforts her. She acts as a good friend, and she's like, yeah, hey, look, it's fine. You can always talk to me about this stuff because I know you can't talk to Cal or Superman. It's you and me are buddies here. And she uses her security man footage and search like that in order to find the image of that woman that Supergirl said she saw. So they go back to the site now in full costume. Why Supergirl isn't worried about being seen now, I don't know, but they say, okay, our around here, let's see if we can find any clues, and we can just keep this away from our respective, father figures, I guess you'd say. So then we actually see that Batman and Superman already know about this. They know that they're out of their rooms, and Batman is aware that she's hacking into like the Bat computer to clear out this stuff. But the Superman and Batman are basically talking, saying like, okay, look, regardless of whatever our plans are for them, what should we do about this now? So we cut back to the place where they're investigating, and they find some sort of like apocalyptic tech. It's something super advanced, and they don't know what it is. But then all of a sudden, Supergirl gets kicked in the face by what seems to be a miniature Wonder Woman, and she introduces herself as Fury, and she says like, oh, if you have any sense, you're not going to investigate this anymore. So Supergirl and Fury start having a punch out, and both of them are like, oh, you're strong, but I'm stronger. And Robin gets caught in the battle a little bit. She gets trapped underneath a little bit of rubble. So immediately Supergirl sees Robin's in trouble. She throws like an extreme punch on Fury, saying, nobody's stronger than me. So she uses that time to go and get Robin out from the rubble. Robin's like, I'm all right, I'm good, go get her. But as Supergirl goes and tries to trace her, no trace of her. So Batman and Superman are watching all this from secret bat cams, and it's just like, okay, whatever they're doing, we can let them do it, but like, who were they just fighting? Do we have any trace on her? And Batman's like, yeah, I kind of got an idea as to who she might belong to, but I didn't. I was hoping she wouldn't complicate issues with the whole apocalyptic war thing coming up. So yeah, we're going to have some problems with her. So we see that Robin has a trace on the like energy signature of the apocalyptic tech, and it's just like, all right, there's a bunch of signatures around here. My dad said whenever you're investigating a crime scene, you just work your way out, so we'll just go to the closest one. It's just north of here. Let's go to that one. And as they get closer, they see there are some tire tracks seemingly leading into a abandoned cave, and it's like, well, that's suspicious enough. Let's go. So Supergirl sets Robin down, zooms inside, immediately gets punched back out, and then she just gets back up and runs back in again. So Supergirl's still punching out Fury. Robin throws a grenade she stole from her dad that's supposed to be able to take out parademons, and Fury's like, I'm not a parademon, I'm Fury of two worlds, and you've earned my wrath. So they continue fighting for a bit until finally something pulls back Supergirl's punch. It's Wonder Woman. She shows up and she's like, children, this isn't your battle, go home. And Supergirl's like, no, I'm not going to go home. I'm going to beat the crap out of her. She's like, don't argue. I'm the last of the Amazons. Don't you argue with me. So Supergirl then starts trying to essentially fight with Wonder Woman as Fury starts making her way deeper and deeper into the cave. So Robin's like, guys, if you guys are going after Fury, she's getting away. And Robin goes to give chase while Supergirl and Wonder Woman stand off. And as she gets deep enough in the cave, she calls out to her father to take her to Apocalypse. Boom tube opens up and closes behind her. So Robin comes back, sees Wonder Woman and Supergirl saying, hey, she's gone. Good job, you guys. And Wonder Woman's like, oh, but is she safe? And he's like, I don't know. There was a hole in the universe. I don't know where she went. Why do you care so much? She's a killer. And Wonder Woman says, like, look, so am I. So are your parents. Before all of this is done, we're all going to be killers. But that one is my child. The end. So for those of you not reading Earth 2, that's a thing that's already been established there, that Fury is the daughter of Wonder Woman who is being used by Apocalypse. We still don't have much more information than what's given here, except that, hey, Wonder Woman like straight up admits to it. Before it was just Fury's word that she was Wonder Woman's daughter. But no, apparently it is actually Wonder Woman's daughter. So that's interesting, to say the very least. Beyond that, I think it's a decently told story. I do think that the second story flowing into the third story works out pretty well. The first story doesn't really have any sort of flow to it. It's just its own completely separate thing. And honestly, I wasn't that into it. It wasn't that it was poorly told. It just didn't feel like it really had any sort of stakes at any point. Like the whole time, Helena never felt like she was in any sort of danger, if that makes sense. So yeah, no, I mean, it's a good issue. It's fine. In terms of the First Contact, like story, it doesn't seem like it's really going to be all that necessary, but it's good to have here as a prelude. Overall, I'm going to give this one a 7.5. I enjoyed it. It's not fantastic, but it is a solid issue overall. And that, for the third and final time, is it. That is all I'm covering. I don't know how long this episode is. I'm hoping an hour and a half, give or take, but I have nothing more I can talk about. That is actually it. So, let's talk about what's coming out next week. Next week, which, of course, is another holiday. It's New Year's Day. They want me to talk about all these comics when I'm even more hungover than I would be on Christmas. But regardless, next week has 16 comics, and those include, in no particular order, Forever Evil Argus, Batman the Dark Knight, Batwoman, Catwoman, Damian the Son of Batman, Talon, Superman, Superman Unchained, Larfleeze, Red Lanterns, Aquaman, The Flash, All-Star Western, Green Team Teen Trillionaires, Teen Titans, and Justice League Dark. Out of those that are important, man, I don't know. Justice League Dark is going to be part of Blight. I know that we're starting Gothtopia soon, but I don't think it's going to be until issues 27, so I think we got a little bit of time there. And then, yeah, no, I don't think Batwoman is the first part of the new writer taking over. So if you want to check that out, that'll be something. Regardless, whatever comes next week is next week's problems. This week, however, if you have anything that you want to talk about in terms of this week's, last week's, any week's comics, go ahead and hit me up in the comments below or on any one of our many social media accounts. Links in the description and or on screen. We got a Discord, a subreddit, a Patreon. Check them out. They are all there for your taking. Anyway, I'm going to go do Christmassy things. What Christmassy things? I don't know yet. I'm going to go into debt. That's a Christmassy thing. I'm going to go into severe debt and put it all on my credit card. So thank you very much for tuning into this week's just absolute mess of an episode. Be sure to tune in next time when I have my act together just a little bit more. And always try to remember that if it ain't broke, don't fix it.